I got it. What's up, guys? I hope you're doing well. Today is Friday, the 20th of December, 2024. And yeah, I was hoping to make this video yesterday when I got the news. But unfortunately, I worked really late yesterday, so I was so tired by the time I was getting home. I was getting home at around 10 p.m., so I was so tired. And I just didn't have the energy to even make a video. But yesterday I got the news that I have an interview with the Andel Institute Graduate School. So I'm so excited. It's one step closer to, you know, getting accepted into a PhD program. So yeah, I have an interview with the Andel Institute Graduate School. So yeah, 1 out of the 7 schools, my very first request. So yeah, that to let you guys know, I was so excited. I was so happy. It's been a very nerve-wracking experience. Deadlines, my last deadline was the 3rd of December. So yeah, the wait has been a little bit nerve-wracking, but at the same time, I've been, you know, trying to keep a spirit of faith and just like praying that God will help me not to be so nervous or anxious for the future, but just trust His plan, whatever it may be. So just knowing that, you know, I got an interview request yesterday. It was so exciting and in a sense somewhat affirming. But yeah, so yeah, I'm really excited for this, and yeah, thought to share that with you. Okay, bye. What's up, guys? How are you doing? Today is Monday, the 30th of December, 2024, and I just got back home from work. And on my way home, I received an email notification from Northwestern University requesting a virtual interview with me. So I'm so happy, so elated. Oh my gosh, when I saw the notification, I was literally waiting for the bus and I could barely keep my composure. I was just telling myself, like, just keep it together, because I was literally on the brink of crying. I was just so happy to receive that. Yeah, just so happy. So yeah, it's a great opportunity. It's a huge blessing for me. So Northwestern has a virtual interview request sent out around this time. And the interviews take place between January and February, so you're given options to schedule your interview. And then once you gain admission, you are invited for an in-person visit in March. So 1 foot in, just 1 step away. But yeah, I'm so thankful. I'm so happy. I thank God. It hasn't been an easy journey, but you know, so experiencing things like this is such a big deal to me. So I'm so thankful for just this opportunity. So now it's up to me to make sure that, you know, I'm very prepared for my interview. So that's what I'll be working on in the next few days. And yeah, just put my best foot forward, do what I need to do. Yeah, just do my best at the end of the day, and wait to see what happens. But yeah, regardless of the outcome, I'm just so happy. I'm happy to even have this opportunity in the first place. So thought to share that with you guys. So I'll be letting you know what happens next. So I'll see you soon. Bye. What's up, guys? It's your girl Faith, and I'm back with another video, and welcome back to Becoming Dr. Kaluba. If this is your first time tuning into my channel, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you guys are doing well. I am back with an update for you. So the last time I uploaded a video, I was talking about preparing for grad school applications and the things that, you know, need to go into your grad school application. And I briefly mentioned, I believe that I was applying to 7 schools in total. So yeah, we're now in April, and it's been a very, very busy period since submitting my applications. The last application I had submitted for grad school was on December 3rd. I forget which school had the December 3rd deadline. I believe it was, I forget which school had the December 3rd deadline, but it may have been Chicago. It may have been Chicago. But yeah, over the course of the past few months, especially between January, February, was pretty much the busiest times. That's when I heard back from a lot of schools regarding like interview offers as well as decisions and whatnot. So as you guys have seen at the beginning of this video, I got an interview offer from the Andel Institute as well as from Northwestern University. So during that time frame, when I got my VAI interview offer and Northwestern, I believe that was when I started to also get decisions from other schools pretty much after. So I got the VAI interview offer first, and then the Northwestern interview offer second. And at the time, I remember some of the schools already tell you when to expect an interview offer, whereas the others give you a very vague period. So say for example, Harvard gives you, I think 2 weeks after the deadline, which was around just before Christmas period, is when you would expect to hear back from them regarding whether or not they're going to give you an interview offer, which pretty much tells you as well whether or not you have a chance to even get in. So if you don't receive an interview offer, really, it gives you a pretty good indication that you probably aren't going to get in. And so when that week had passed, I was like, yeah, I'm probably not going to get into Harvard, which was fine. So yeah, that week came and went. I was like, yeah, Harvard's not there, so that leaves me 6 schools. Then I heard back from VAI. VAI got back to me, I think sometime in January. I believe I'm going to put the date when I heard back from them. But yeah, VAI got back to me in January. And then shortly after, Northwestern got back to me. And then during that period, I was like, okay, let me wait for the other schools. So some of the other schools will, like I said, give you a vague period. So some of the schools are like, oh, you expect to hear back between January and March. Seems like a very short period, but it's actually quite long, especially when you are applying to multiple schools. It's quite long because you have to time and plan your interviews very strategically. Most of the interviews either take a day or two, especially if you're traveling in person for the interviews. It may potentially take a little longer, so you need to plan them in a good way. Say for example, my so VAI had given me, I believe it was two or three interview date options, and Northwestern had given me 3 interview date options. And Northwestern specifically was doing virtual interviews, and they were 2-day virtual interviews. And so one of the dates that they had offered of the 3 overlapped with one of the dates that VAI had offered. So now you can imagine, if you are applying to multiple schools and you get feedback from those multiple schools, you need to be able to plan in a good way. So it's if you're still waiting to hear back from other schools, and you have schools that are giving you such a huge range, it is technically likely for you to have these overlaps happening. And so it's just nice anyway to know when the schools will be getting back to you, like to have a good estimate, just so you're able to also plan accordingly what your interview dates look like. Especially like say if you're in school at the time or you're working, it's good to be able to plan those things so that even your bosses or your professors know when you'll need to be out and whatnot. The first school that I got an outright rejection from was U Chicago. U Chicago's rejection came in, I think that was sometime in February. Yeah, I'll confirm that, but yeah, it was sometime in February, I believe. I got my first rejection from U Chicago. Funny enough, I think I was expecting to hear back from a lot of these schools during like typical working hours. So like outside of like working hours, I wouldn't really like check to see like if there's an update on my application. And another thing, usually when things haven't gone as positively, you receive like not an automated message per se, but one that's asking you to like go to the site because there's been an update on your application. Whereas when you're getting an interview offer, at least in my experience, they email you directly with saying like, you know, we want to inform you, da 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 da. So I actually found out from one of my workmates. We both had applied to U Chicago's program, and I applied to the cancer bio program at Chicago. And so she messaged me, I believe that was around like 8 p.m., which again, outside working hours, and she was like, have you like heard back? Did you see like I got my decision from Chicago and whatnot? I was like, this time, like I was not expecting them to respond at the time that they did. So I was just like, oh, okay, let me check it out. And so I saw that U Chicago had rejected me, which was fine, you know. Funny enough, that was fine to me. I say so because I think for the longest I've been the type of person who fears rejection, and you know, I need to say like I just don't process that well, because in as much as people will tell you, especially as you are like applying to grad school, people say like there are a number of reasons why you could be rejected. My fear was that I was going to really internalize that and not think of it as, oh, like there are multiple reasons here, but I would think it's because of me, like it's solely my fault, and something that I had done, which granted that's a possibility, but I would essentially ignore all other possibilities, you know. So I was like, and I think, you know, even in the prior year, I didn't think to apply because I was like, I don't want to apply, like what if I'm not good enough and whatnot. Granted, I thank God that I applied when I did, because there's a lot of things that I did and I had in terms of like skills, having a paper be like being reviewed by a top journal, and just a lot of things that I've been able to do at the time prior to my application, that if I say applied a year before, I just know I wouldn't have been a competitive candidate at all. But yeah, anyway, that was the thought process at the time. And so like when I was applying to grad school, it was one of the things that I prayed about, and I asked God. I said, you know, God, please help me to accept whatever decision may come, like help me to accept whatever rejections may come and not take it to be something that defines me and my whole life. Help me to be accepting in that whatever happens is because you've willed it to happen that way, and help me to have an outlook that, you know, whatever direction you take me to is because it's for my good, not because of anything negative, and help me accept it to be like that, you know. So I really thank God that even after receiving that rejection from Chicago, I was just like, oh well, you know, it's okay. So yeah, that in itself was a huge blessing. But yeah, I was just like, okay, at that point, it was like, how many schools left? 4, because I had already ruled that. Wait. It was 5 at that point. Yeah, because I had already ruled out Harvard, and I was like, okay, Chicago is out of the picture. That's fine. The next rejection that I received was, let me see, Chicago. What other schools? So I applied to Harvard, Chicago, Duke, UT Southwestern. By the way, I'm so sorry. I'm just realizing that I did not mention the schools that I applied to. My bad. So I applied to Harvard, University of Chicago, University of Texas, Southwestern, Duke University, Northwestern, Van Andel Institute, and University of Pennsylvania. So yeah, those were my 7 choices for applying. This was from a thorough application, like search, school search, depending on the programs that I wanted to pursue. So I mentioned, I believe in the previous video that I had posted, that I would be pursuing a PhD in cancer biology. Now, the different schools have different program names that have a cancer biology focus within those programs. A lot of these are umbrella programs. Umbrella programs meaning they encompass a lot. So say for example, University of Pennsylvania has a CAMB program. I believe it's the cellular and molecular biology program. In that, one second. Sorry about that. I needed to attend to something. So I was saying the University of Pennsylvania has the CAMB program. So the CAMB program also allows you to eventually specialize in a cancer biology focus, but it also has other programs. It has a cell biology program, quite a variety of programs under that program. I think there's also a developmental biology program under that, if I'm not mistaken. Same thing with Northwestern University. Northwestern University has the Driscoll Graduate Program, which is the program I applied to, the DGP. It also is more of an umbrella program in that it encompasses a lot of other programs. So you could eventually then focus on one thing. So they also have a cancer biology and a more metabolism focus. So there are different schools with different programs. I forget my line of thought when I initially brought this up, but yeah, I'll probably remember at some point. But anyway, all to say, I applied to those 7 schools, and so Chicago, I applied to their cancer bio program. Harvard, I forget the exact program name that I applied to, but my goal was to more so hyper focus on cancer biology. So of all these 7 schools, I applied to them really for their cancer bio program, and for some of them, they really had a good focus on metabolism, which is what I would really want to do. It's also what I've gotten my training in over the almost 3 years now, and what I really enjoy doing. Metabolism has a lot of biochemistry focus, which I really enjoyed in undergrad, and I feel like my brain just processes that better. So I really enjoy that most. So I applied to those. So Harvard, Chicago. I think the next school I may have gotten a rejection from was, let me see. I think the next school that I got a rejection from may have been University of Pennsylvania. I got the same message to go check my application portal and whatnot. So I didn't get into UPenn. UPenn did hurt. it did hurt a bit. Like for that day, it did hurt. I was like, oh, UPenn was like one of my top schools and whatnot. So I was really hoping I would get a positive like response from there. But then again, remember the prayer that I told you about. Everything happens, for my good. The Bible talks about how, everything happens for the good, for those who love the Lord, And so even as I, pursue my relationship with God, I have faith in knowing that, it's not about me per se as a person, but it's about who God is and who He's shown Himself to be in my life. And I trust that whatever happens in my life, it's because God has allowed it. And ultimately, from the beginning of it all, it was for my good. Because God means no harm to His people. And so, it did hurt that day, but I was like, you know what? Whatever happens, God has allowed it to happen. I may not see it, I may not understand why, but He's allowed it to happen. So we'll go with that. After UPenn's rejection, I think the next rejection I may have gotten, I can't remember which one came first, but anyway, I got a rejection from Duke. These schools came like later, like Duke and UT Southwestern. The rejections came much later. I believe the rejections came like after my interviews, like with both Northwestern and with the Van Andel Institute. UT Southwestern, Duke, and then eventually I heard from Harvard. I believe I heard from Harvard around March 15th or before, but all these were coming pretty much around the same time. So so let me see. Harvard, U Chicago, Penn, UT Southwestern, Duke. So that's 5 rejections. So we're left with the Van Andel Institute and grad school and Northwestern University. So my first interview was with the Van Andel Institute. I believe I interviewed with the Van Andel Institute on January 17th, if I'm not mistaken. It was a Friday. So for starters, I would say it felt very odd walking into the Van Andel Institute that day, because for the first time I was walking in as a potential graduate student and not a research technician, which is my typical day-to-day. I'm used to just going to work, but this time it was interviewing, and all the other candidates were seated in the lobby. They had sent us a program. One thing I will say, the Van Andel Institute was very good at communicating, from when they send you the interview offer to having you sign up for what dates. They would send you reminders and whatnot. I think they gave 2-3 weeks before the actual interview dates that they had offered. So there was an interview in January, which was the one I signed up for, and there was another one in February. Quite frankly, I'm not sure if there was a third. I remember 2. So I signed up for the first one. And they were very good with their communication. They sent us what we needed for the interview, and they let us know when they would send that information. And so I walked in, and the other candidates were there, and it hit me in that moment to say I had never before interviewed with a bunch of other people in person. Even for my research tech position at the time, I was in Massachusetts when I was interviewing for it. And so everything was virtual. So that was the first time I'd been in a position where I was applying for a school and interviewing in person. So it's when you're on your own, you can sort of manage your own thoughts and whatnot. You're in your own space. And more so if you're around your family, depending on the type of like family you have, you know, you could sort of like buffer whatever you're feeling based on the support of your support system. But in that moment, like when you're in person, it's very easy to find yourself sort of taking in the emotions of the people around you, depending on the type of person you are. And so that for me was something I had to be very conscious of. And it was just, yeah, a very different experience. Like you could sort of tell like people are, you know, somewhat like on edge about the interview itself, but it's like, okay, let's get it going, you know, type of feeling. But yeah, I got to interact with some of the other like candidates who were interviewing, and it honestly just felt so surreal to be in a position where it's like I was just so being like aware and present in the fact that, oh wow, I'm actually applying for graduate school, you know, to pursue a PhD, and I'm now like at this stage of the process, you know. So that was like, I was just so grateful for that moment. It's like a culmination of all your work, you know. But yeah, had that meeting and then had that moment rather. Then the first thing we did was like have a meeting with the dean of the graduate school. And so he did a presentation, a PowerPoint presentation, giving us like information about the grad program, what their curriculum is, and the different like stages of the program that you go through. Gave us more info regarding the stipend, the benefits, and a bunch of different resources. They also had like some packages for us, like interviewing packets and whatnot, which was really nice. They had drinks and some snacks for us. And then after that meeting, we were also introduced to some of the people briefly, some of the people who play a critical role in the functioning of the grad school program, some of the like directors and whatnot, which was really nice. And then after that, we had a tour of the institute. So we toured the graduate school. The Van Andel Institute deliberately targets only a maximum group of like 20 graduate students. So you can imagine, I believe this intake alone had multiple candidates. If I'm not mistaken, they could have been around 200, if not over that, who had applied to the program, and they were only targeting for a maximum of 20 people. So, and the group that I was in was like the first group of graduate candidates that they had selected from there. And they were, of course, going to have a second group of interviews. So it's like, yeah, they were trying to pick the best candidates for their program based on that pool. And from the people who were there, like it wasn't just people from Michigan. There were people like who came in. One of the students I remember was coming from Stanford. Another one was also based in California. I forget which school she was representing, but she was coming from LA. Not necessarily representing, but what school she came from. There was another student who was coming from MIT. There was just so many people from all over. Some of them were like technicians at the institute who, funny enough, I'd never met or seen before that. But yeah, it was a very interesting experience. We got to tour the school, got to tour like the grad school, as well as the institute as a whole, which was very nice. But at the same time, I was more at ease because I pretty much know most of like the institute, some of the things that the institute has to offer as a result of working there. One of the things that I really like about the Van Andel Institute is it's a very collaborative institute and organization. And I know like a lot of schools will say that, but not actually showcase that. And it's something that I got to learn even as I was interviewing and even getting the opportunity to talk to PIs from other schools, as well as like grad students from other schools. There are schools that will say, oh yeah, you know, we're very collaborative, but
that doesn't actually play out in the interactions between like labs and departments. But at the Van Andel Institute, it's literally in the network. I forget what the word is that I'm looking for, but it's one of the core values of the institute, and you really see it in just how they plan out events, how they plan out the meetings, the seminars, the sessions, the involvement of the PIs with each other. It's not a situation where it's like, oh, if you're epigenetics, you're just epigenetics. Like there are times when, so like in the metabolism department, we have monthly meetings where there are like presentations from people of different labs and whatnot. But even at those meetings, like it's within the Department of Metabolism and Nutritional Programming. But you see like PIs from epigenetics, for example, or like structural biology come through and they attend these things. And so they really participate. There are also some PIs who come from neuro, you know, so it's really a part of like what the institute is. And one of the things I really like about it is they really try to foster those connections. So say for example, if I'm doing a project that is metabolism heavy, but there are also aspects of it that are like based on epigenetics. It's very easy for me to reach out to someone in the epigenetics department and collaborate with them on whatever project I'm working. Whereas some institutes may not have the same kind of like environment or the same kind of like values in that sense. So it just makes it very difficult, because sometimes you will have a project that requires a certain knowledge base that is not common in your department, and so you will need that input. So knowing that you have that kind of easy access to those departments, it can really come in clutch. So that was one thing that I really like about VAI. And I think, you know, even when I was going into the interviews, I was like, I don't know if I could like this institute any more than I already do. But I did, you know, and it's something that I was not expecting. Yeah, I really like the collaborative aspect to it. A lot of the grad students also just seem very happy at the institute. Like they have a graduate student association, which I was very happy to hear about, because in undergrad I was very active in like clubs and whatnot. It really helped me keep sane. And during my undergrad experience, I just like to be involved. Yeah, because like I said, it helps me keep sane. And so I like that they have an active graduate student association that tends to play out as a bridge between the students and admin. So I was really happy to hear some of the things that they're like working on. Like say for example, one of the things that they're trying to work on is creating like some sort of like a pass for students, like a subsidized bus pass for students, so that it costs a little less for the students at the Van Andel Institute to use public transportation and whatnot, which is something that I learned some of the schools actually have. Like there's some schools that have an agreement with, say, companies like Uber, where students get to either pay less or not at all for the cost of Ubers within a certain distance from the school's area or the vicinity. So there are things like that. Or there are some schools that also have those kinds of arrangements in terms of like not only the bus passes but trains. So yeah, I was really happy to at least hear things like that. Those arrangements are there. Also, the Van Andel Institute doesn't have like that school vibe. It's more like a work type vibe going, because again, it is an institute where you have researchers and whatnot. I'm employed there, so it doesn't have like an undergrad institute attached to it. That may be a pro or a con depending on what exactly your values are. or like what kind of environment you're trying to look at. For me personally, I don't mind either or. But yeah, it's a more professional setting in that sense. But yeah, aside from like the collaboration, I really like that at VAI you could get a lot of like direct training from the cores. So like they have like a mass spec core or a proteomics core, RNA sequencing, like all these different things, and you could directly interact with the people who are like heads or like who specialize in working with specific instruments, very expensive instruments. And so you can get training and learn how to do those things. Like one of the things that I know how to do now as a result of my work as an employee is mass spectrometry. So I know I could run my samples on my own, prepare, run, do the whole shebang. But part of that training came from interacting with people in the mass spec core. You could also learn how to like do histone extractions and whatnot and run your samples. There are opportunities for that kind of specialized training, which I think is a big deal, because sometimes depending on the kind of institute you're at, you don't have much flexibility in terms of that kind of specialized training. So another thing that I really like about the Van Andel Institute is the location. So it's based in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and I've been in Michigan for about 6 years, going on 7 years. So Michigan is like my second home at this point. And yeah, I really like the state of Michigan in general. The one downside of Michigan is the winters. The winters are rough. But I will say in the past 2 years now, the winters have been fairly mild, in the sense that like you'd have like 1 or 2 major storms, but after that it's pretty chill. So I'm just praying that in the next few years, it continues like that or more. But yeah, the winters can be quite rough in Michigan, like say in comparison to like in the South doesn't really get as much winters, if any, that are like as rough or brutal as they are in Michigan and other states in the East Coast or Midwest area. But yeah, the winters are quite rough. But generally, as a state alone, Michigan is a very nice state to live in. And so I've been very grateful for that. And so I like that aspect to Michigan. Also, the cost of living in Michigan is fairly cheaper than a lot of other states. So I really like that. Cost of living in Grand Rapids, even though like it's a city, it's pretty nice in comparison. Like say for example, if I were to compare to Chicago, especially given the location of the Northwestern Driscoll grad school program, it's based in downtown Chicago. And so the cost of living, like say in Grand Rapids, you could get a really good apartment for under $1,300, whereas that's a 1 bed, 1 bath. Whereas in like Chicago, you could spend at least $1,600 for an apartment of the same size as in Grand Rapids that you're paying for $1,300. You could pay $1,600, if not $1,800, or even $2,000, especially within downtown Chicago. The closer you are to the location of Northwestern University, the downtown campus that is, the more expensive it is, because it's based in, what's it called, the place? It's not Stevensville, is it? I'll check, but somethingville is the location of the Northwestern downtown campus, and it is expensive. It is very expensive. But yeah, I'll get more into that in a little bit. But yeah, the cost of living in Grand Rapids is fairly cheaper, and for me, who's been in Grand Rapids for the past 2 years now, I pretty much know how to get around Grand Rapids. I know what living in Grand Rapids is like. Also, in terms of like the crime rate is not as high, relatively as high as some of these other cities. And so I really like the location of where the Van Andel Institute is. So yeah, they also offer a competitive stipend, which is nice. As maybe some of you have heard, grad students don't get a lot of money. They don't get a lot in terms of the stipend. The same follows for postdocs who, you know, when you're working in academia, you don't get as much as, say, most of the discussions around pay are usually a comparison of what you earn in academia versus industry. But generally, grad students don't really get much in comparison. Like, you're looking at, on average, if I were to compare between the states, you're looking at an average of like $40,000. And this is post a lot of like schools being unionized, and so a lot of them have increased their stipend. But the highest stipend I would say that I saw was, was 50,000. But even then, that was in a very expensive city. So I don't know how much of a real difference that makes in terms of balancing the cost of living in general in that city. I think that was Harvard's stipend, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong. Harvard stipend has now gone up to 50,000, if I'm not mistaken. But Boston is a very expensive city to live in. So yeah, there are things like that that you have to consider. But VAI has a pretty competitive stipend, which is nice. So you at least know you'll be able to live comfortably, you know, live within your means on that stipend. So yeah, I really like those different aspects to VAI. The students just seem very happy there. And I've also gotten to interact with a number of students prior to the interview. So that was really nice. So yeah, after the tour of the institute was when it was like time to start interviews. So each one of us had a pretty like different schedule for that day. My first interview was with the admissions committee. So I had 2 people on my admissions committee who I had to meet with. Was it nerve-wracking? Yeah, it was a little nerve-wracking, but you know, at that point, I just left everything in God's hands and told myself to say, you know, just do your best, listen to the questions that are being asked and answer to the best of your ability. So yeah, I really liked the interaction that I had with the PIs. They asked me the kind of questions that I did prepare for, to be honest with you. There are a number of resources that you could use to prepare for like grad school interviews and whatnot on YouTube alone. So I did that. One of the other things that I also did was I did like a mock interview with my PI. So much as my PI is at the same institute, I can't get interviewed by my PI, of course. But that's something that I would strongly encourage you to do if you're watching this video and at the time at which you're watching it, you're preparing for any type of interview. But in this case, being your grad school interview, and say you have like a research, you're working in any research capacity and you have a boss who has had experience with like either interviewing people for grad school or has been through the process themselves, I strongly encourage you to seize that opportunity that you have. It's a privilege that you have to have someone who is mentoring you, who's been through the process. Seize that opportunity to just have a sit down with them and ask them, can I do a practice interview with you, a mock interview, to just get you prepared for what that kind of setting is like. And so that was one of the things that I did. My PI was happy enough to do that with me during one of our one-on-ones. And so I practiced. He quizzed me, he asked me questions, he interviewed me and gave me his assessment based off of how I responded to the questions. And that really helped me just like feel more confident about how I was going into the interview. So yeah, I had my interview at the admissions committee, which I think went pretty well. Yeah, so I had that, and then afterwards I had an interview. So I was interviewing with 2 other PIs as well. So before my actual interview date, they had sent out like a survey where you or a questionnaire where you fill out the PIs that you would want to interview with. This was the same also with Northwestern. So I filled out the PIs whose labs I was interested in. So even as you're doing that part to it, select PIs whose work you're actually interested in, because there's really no point in you interviewing with people who you have no interest, whose work you have no interest in. Well, I mean, there is a point for the sake of the school, they could do that. That actually happened for me with my interviews, but the point is, if you have the option to select the PIs you want to interview, select PIs whose work you're actually interested in. Which, if you go back to my last video, I talked about how one of the metrics that I used to narrow down my list of schools was the PIs, the research that is being done by specific PIs. And I mentioned that I wasn't going to apply to a school if I wasn't interested in at least 3 of the PI's research. That also comes in clutch when you're interviewing, because they want to know that at least for one, they actually have the ability to provide what you are looking to get out of your graduate school experience, but also that you can interact with the different PIs, and they can also assess whether you're the type of student they would want to have in their lab. So yeah, it's key that you actually select the PIs whose work you're interested in. It makes your life easier as well as you're preparing for the interview, because you also want to prepare to ask them questions about their work, their experience. So if you don't know, understand, or have any interest in what it is that they're doing, you will definitely have a hard time interviewing with those PIs. So I selected, I think it allowed for me, either the request was for me to select 5 PIs, or yeah, I can't remember what the prompt was, but yeah, I selected 5 PIs, and of the 5, 2 of them were actually my recommenders. One of them is a PI who I have done some collaborative work with. So of the 5, 2 of them were the ones who interviewed me. And yeah, I had a pretty good experience with the interviewing. The PIs were very nice. It was a different experience to have that one-on-one interaction with them in the context of me interviewing. And between the interviews, we had like a lunch break and a talk with one of the directors who is more so concerned with like campus affairs as well as particularly student affairs. So she interacts really well with the students to address some of the things that they may need like help with and resources with on or whatnot. So there was a period where like we could have a semi Q&A session, and she could talk to like a small group of us. So that was really nice. And then I had a break to prepare for my next interview. And then yeah, the lunch break was really nice as well, because I got to interact with some of the grad students who actually work in one of the labs that I'm really interested in at the institute. So it was very nice to have like that kind of conversation. Unfortunately, that particular PI isn't taking in any more grad students. But again, the thing that I really like about the institute is, even though the PI isn't taking in grad students, you could still end up doing some kind of collaborative work with them, which was something that I actually discussed with her, and she was very open and happy to that about that. So that was really nice. I really liked that aspect to it. So yeah, I got to talk to some of the students, like the entire lunch. I was just interacting with them and whatnot, and I had a really good time. Having the conversation that we had. I got to know more about their work as, you know, leaders in the Graduate Student Association, as well as just their overall experience being graduate students at the Van Andel Institute Graduate School. So I really liked that. I had my other interview, which went pretty well. And then after that, we had a research in progress session. So essentially, the research in progress, which we typically call RIP, is like a session where the PIs get to discuss like the research that is going on in their lab in front of the entire institute. So for us who are interviewing, we also had to attend that. It's something that happens almost every Friday. And so one of the things that I had told myself I was going to do is ask a question during my interview. And I did that, you know, like thinking about a question based on the presentation. It's also another thing that helps you stand out during your applications, because you have to think about it this way. There are a number of students who are applying, a number of students who are interviewing. So I think it's nice for you to do your part to stand out for the right reasons, you know. So yeah, I asked a question, and after that we had a semi-break before we went for a dinner with the first year students. So we had dinner. Quite frankly, I was very tired by that point because it was honestly more social interaction than I am used to. So even like coming into like this interview, I knew that there was going to be a dinner. So I really had to prepare myself mentally for the amount of interaction I was going to have. I had to make sure my social battery was fully charged. But yeah, I felt all right about the interview overall. I felt pretty confident. We went for dinner, and it also gave opportunity to not only chat with the other students who were interviewing, but also talk to some of the first year students, talk about what their experience has been like so far and whatnot. And then after that, we went for like bowling. It was like a mini pin bowling or something like that, where the alleys are shorter and the bowling pins are also smaller. So mini pin bowling. Duck pin bowling was what it was called. Yeah, duck pin bowling. So we did that, and it was pretty nice. I was getting home, I think around 11 or something. So it was a very long day. I was at work, I think around 8-ish, 8:30-ish. Yeah, it was a very long day, but it was quite fulfilling, to be honest. The interview went pretty well, so I thank God for that. They did tell us during that interview day to say we would likely be hearing back regarding the decision from the schools about a week or 2 weeks later. So I was like, okay, you know, waiting to hear back. I believe it was the week after, on the Friday, when I heard back from the Van Andel Institute, around like 5-ish or close to 5 p.m. I remember I was doing mass spec at the time. I was just about to load my samples on the mass spec machine when I got the email saying I got in. I got in, yeah. I got in. I got into the Van Andel Institute graduate program. I was very happy. I was so ecstatic. Thank God I was alone at the time because I was so happy to hear that news, and it felt so surreal. Like, you know, I created this channel with the mindset of, becoming a medical doctor. And then I switched my whole career plan, being after realizing, I didn't want to do medicine, but I wanted to be able to have an impact on medicine indirectly through research. And then deciding to say, I want to pursue this career in research, and I want to advance it by pursuing a PhD, and then to actually getting into a grad school program. I was so happy. We were 8 of us who got in based off of the first round of interviews. So I was so thankful. I was so thankful to have been given that opportunity with an award to come with it. So I was just so grateful for that. I was so thankful. So yeah, I got into VAI. The next school, Northwestern. So I had my interview with Northwestern. So like I mentioned earlier, the interview with Northwestern was a virtual interview. So the way Northwestern has been doing things since, I believe, COVID era was that they would do a 2-day virtual interview. From that virtual interview is when they would send out offers of admission. Based on those offers of admission, you would then be able to tour the school in person. You would get an invite to tour the school. So I interviewed with Northwestern. I believe it was the weekend of Valentine's. Yeah, I believe it was the weekend of Valentine's Day. So 13th and 14th February. Either 13th and 14th or 14th and 15th. I can't remember, but around the weekend of Valentine's Day was when I had my interview with Northwestern. So almost exactly a month. Where to start? So everything was over Zoom, and the first session was so there were a bunch of Q&A sessions that they had sent. Well, let me rephrase that. So like the Van Andel Institute, they sent a survey asking us which PIs we would want to interview with, as well as the dates of the interviews that we want to have. So I had selected that weekend, and then from the survey I selected the PIs that I would want to interview with during that weekend, or during those 2 days. It was a Thursday and a Friday. So I selected those, and then it being a virtual interview, they also had the option for you to receive either an Uber Eats coupon or something and a meal from one of the restaurants to be shipped to you for the interview. So I thought that was pretty cool. They did that, and then so I signed up, I filled out the survey and whatnot. So coming to interview day, they had also sent a program, a detailed program of what the sessions would be like. So the Thursday was pretty much the longest day, and on that Thursday was when I had my 3 interviews. So I had 3 interviews with the PIs, and then 1 interview with a person from the admissions committee. So on the Thursday I had my 3 interviews with the PIs, with the different PIs, and then on the Friday was when I had my interview with a person from the admissions committee. So the first day started with a session with some of the organizers, where we got to just talk to them and interact with them based on, they were telling us about Northwestern University, and then that was followed up by a bunch of a few breaks and a bunch of Q&A sessions. It was a Q&A session regarding housing and living in Chicago. There was another one that was I think I'm thinking about one of the others that were there on Friday, where we got to interact with international students as well. Well, there were different sessions, and you got to pick which breakout room you wanted to be in. So I opted to be in one where there was I got to interact with some international students at Northwestern. Yeah, and then there was another breakout room where you had a student who is part of the grad student union, who I also like wanted to hear from and whatnot. I'm trying to think.
Hey guys, so I'm editing right now and I realized that there's some things that I didn't quite emphasize as much or discuss in as much detail as I would have liked regarding the Northwestern interview. So I just talked about some sessions that we had on the Thursday. So I mentioned how initially there was the first session with the organizers who gave us like a brief overview of what schooling at Northwestern is like in the DGP. And then, like I stated, there was a bunch of like different Q&A sessions that we had. So the first was, well, quite frankly, I can't remember them in the exact order, but there was a housing Q&A. So in the housing Q&A was where we had 3 students who talked to us essentially about like living in Chicago as a student of the DGP. So for starters, I think the more well-known campus for Northwestern is the Evanston campus, which is their main campus, just outside of Chicago. And then the downtown Chicago campus is where the DGP program is based. So yeah, so housing is somewhat different. I know the main campus, I think, has like some student housing options that are available, whereas if you're living in downtown Chicago, you pretty much find an apartment of your own. The school did send us some info regarding like apartments based on like places that students currently are living in and what the cost of rent is, depending on the type of living space they're in, be it like a 1-bed 1-bath, a studio apartment, or like a condo where they're like sharing with other people. And also there was like somewhat of variety going there, but essentially you have to like look for an apartment. It's not like, say, in undergrad where most campuses like have designated housing for students and whatnot. So that was honestly something that I was anticipating, and it's something that I would have opted for anyway. But during the housing Q&A, for example, is where I got to really learn about what the cost of living in Chicago will look like. For starters, it's very expensive. I think coming from Grand Rapids, where I've been living in Grand Rapids for almost 3 years now, my starting rent in my first year was, I think, $1,125 for a 1-bed 1-bath. That's like, I think, just over or exactly 520 square feet. So it's a pretty good living space, especially for me. It was pretty good, and the rent price was definitely down. You will not find an apartment that costs that much in Chicago unless there's like some special offer of some sort, but it's just not a common thing, you know. So for the apartments, like most of the students were paying for apartments like around $1,700. That's for those who are living like in Streeterville, $1,700, others $1,800, others $2,000 for like a 1-bed 1-bath, and that's like a smaller sized apartment. And I was just like, I don't even know if I'm going to be able to afford this. I'm not very sure about how that's going to pan out, you know. And so I was very curious to know not only about what the cost of living looks like, but just how students are typically like managing to live in Chicago. I just really wanted to have a good understanding of that, and having talked to a few students even as the day went by outside of the housing Q&A, like in the session where I had talked to like some international students, I can't recall if that was during the Thursday session or the Friday session. I can't recall for the life of me, but I at least had the opportunity to talk to some international students, and I remember asking them, like, are you able to like save money? Like, what does that look like? And they were just like, no, you cannot save money. And for me, that was a very important thing for me to at least be able to save something, you know, during that time. And I was just like, what is this going to look like for me? One thing that I really didn't want to be a cause for concern was finances. I didn't want to be stressed about my finances, or just making sure I at least have money in case of emergencies. So that was something that was important to me. But yeah, it's something that I think was also a cause for concern for a number of students who were interviewing. I remember some students were like in a similar predicament. One student was coming from Pennsylvania, works near UPenn, and he was telling us about how he pays, I don't know if he said $800 per month for a two-bedroom apartment. I was just like, I wish that would be a dream, you know. But yeah, so I was just like, wow. And he earns a lot more, you know. And he was concerned from a place of like how much of a shift that would be, understandably, you know. But yeah, being able to save, I think, is important. So that was concerning to me. But anyway, some of the other things that I got to learn during my interview were also pretty much about what the dynamics are in terms of like the lab space, how the students interact, what opportunities are offered to them. A lot of like seminars or conferences tend to happen in Chicago, so students have a lot of opportunities to participate in these seminars, to participate in these conferences, and essentially showcase their research and have those opportunities to network with people from like different spaces, which is a great thing, which is one of the reasons why I was looking at Northwestern. The other thing is the clinical setting. So Northwestern has a hospital that is attached to their program. I forgot to mention that the DGP, is under the Feinberg School of Medicine. So yeah, they do have a hospital attached, which I really was looking forward to because I don't have experience working with human samples, like clinical samples. So I would have liked that kind of training, as it is something that I foresee myself like wanting to work with in the future once I establish my own lab. So I would have wanted that kind of exposure. So that was one of the things I really liked about Northwestern. And I got to have a better understanding of what that looks like realistically and just how much exposure the students have to that. So essentially, when I talked to the PIs, what they had explained to me is that when it comes to like exposure to the clinical setting, the students really only have the only amount of access the students have to human samples or just like a clinical setting really is getting handed over like the samples to process and prep to work with. There isn't like much of like exposure to, say for example, if you're doing like a tracer infusion, you know, with a human patient. I didn't hear anything about that, which is something that I would have really liked. It's something that I know is actually done at the University of Chicago, which is why I applied to the University of Chicago to have that kind of exposure. One of the labs has a PI who is doing that currently. And so, yeah, so that was one of the things that I was like, okay, you know, it's something that I would like to get some training on, but maybe it's not as, it wasn't as I had envisioned it in terms of the amount of exposure you get. And granted, that may be the only amount of exposure that I could get as a PhD holder. But yeah, I really wanted to like, I guess, work with more like infusion stuff, like kind of thing, as well as even like research that involves, say, drug testing and whatnot. I would have liked to work with like samples from those kinds of things, and maybe that's something that some labs do that particularly were not the ones that I had a real interest in terms of like the whole focus of the lab and the PR. But anyway, so yeah, that was something that was of interest to me. When it came to like student affairs outside of like the lab setting, in terms of like the social aspect or the social scenery of the school, like I had mentioned earlier, one of the things that I really liked to do in undergrad is just like be active, be involved in clubs and different associations. So one of the students did mention to say that most of the clubs and whatnot are based on the Evanston campus, are based at the Evanston campus. That's where a lot of like those activities happen. There are a few like clubs that they've tried to like initiate and are currently active at the downtown campus, but most of the stuff is done at the Evanston campus. When it came to like other like things that like are lifestyle based, which also comes at a cost, like things like fitness, working out. So Northwestern does have some kind of like arrangement with a gym, a certain like gym that has like different branches or locations within Chicago. A very good gym. I forget the name. I hadn't heard of it prior to my interview, honestly. But yeah, I forget the name, but from what we heard, it's a very good gym. So Northwestern has an arrangement with them. You have to pay, was it $35 or $53 per month? Something like that, between $35 and $53 per month, which already I was just like, the rent is expensive, and especially like finding an apartment complex that already has like a gym, that comes with an expense of its own. Paying for a gym is another thing. The gym that is like attached to the school, as is the case with like many schools, is based on the Evanston campus. The Evanston campus is a distance away from the downtown campus, and that one is accessible to the students, but in downtown you have to pay for that. I was just like, oh my goodness. So the gym is a cost, rent is a cost. If you're thinking about rent, you also have to think about utilities. Some apartment complexes come with that expense. And the other thing regarding like the rent, some of the students were recommending like opting to rent from like a single owner, so not like a leasing company, because that tends to be more affordable. But I feel like the thing with renting from like a single like owner, it comes with like the risk of just you have to make sure that this person is legit, and the best way to do that in this case would be like if you get a referral from someone else that the other thing is, when it comes to like things like maintenance, one of the things that I appreciate about renting from a leasing company, a good leasing company that is that if I have an issue with my apartment, I just fill out a maintenance request and they're there by the next day, and they resolve the issue and it's good to go. But if it's like with a single person, I mean, granted, I don't know, it could be a good landlord. I'm assuming a good landlord would be able to take care of that. But some people don't. And I was just like, I don't want to deal with things like that. I really don't want to deal with things like that. There's already those like types of costs attached. Even I was just like, what is this gonna look like? But yeah, when it comes to like, anyway, at least the academic side to things, those are the things that I mentioned that I really got to learn and appreciate. It's just my concerns, I think, came from the cost of living, as well as as well as like things like engagement and whatnot in terms of like the social aspect with other students. What else? I'm trying to think. I think those were, if anything, some of like the major things I got to learn. When it comes to like the international student office and whatnot, I heard very positive things about how they like respond and engage with the students, which is such a huge plus for me as an international student. Some of the other things that I learned is let me see. Northwestern stipend is at $45,000 as your studying stipend, and then over the years, I believe it increases. And that, of course, comes with like your health insurance, your dental, and vision. So those things are pretty good benefits to have, which is quite similar to what other schools have to like offer. They also offer, I think, a relocation package, as well as they can reimburse you for the cost of like your laptop provided. It's like either $1,000 or under $1,000. So I thought that's pretty nice. Van Andel also had a similar like offer. But yeah, honestly, there wasn't, thinking back at it, there were like quite a number of similarities between what Northwestern had to offer versus what VA had to offer. I think at the end of the day, the things that were like more things for me to really think about were just like the cost of living. It's a very serious thing to me, you know. Things like transportation. Chicago has a better transportation system than Grand Rapids in that it has more options. In Grand Rapids, your public transportation system looks like the buses, which I'm very thankful for. The bus system has been really good to me. Though when it comes to like sitting, the only like restriction or limitation about it is there are certain areas where you can't just like make a direct trip. So a place could be like a 15-minute drive away from like my location, but because the bus doesn't take a direct, there's no bus that takes a direct route there, I would have to like head to the station first and then switch buses to head to, and then walk. And it's just like, those are some of like the limitations to that. So the next best option is like an Uber or a Lyft. But in Chicago, you have a pretty good like train system as well as the bus system, so you have those options there. And yeah, Northwestern does offer like some subsidized arrangement where you don't get to pay like the regular cost at a certain point, using like your bus pass or your like the pass you use for like your train rides. But yeah, those were like some of the cool things I got to learn. But like I said, there were some causes for concern with those. When I weighed the two options between VAI and Northwestern, at VAI, I know one of the limitations was that I wouldn't get like the kind of exposure to the clinical setting as I would at Northwestern. So that was one thing for me that I had to like really think about. But in terms of like the benefits to that, it's definitely like cheaper for me to live in Grand Rapids, and it's more financially, it's better for me than it would be in Chicago. What are other things? Familiarity. I'm more familiar with the Grand Rapids environment, like I had mentioned earlier, as opposed to Chicago. It would be a more seamless, a much smoother transition for me in Grand Rapids than it would be in Chicago. But Northwestern does have a more prestigious name than the Van Andel Institute. And, you know, and as much as I would like to live in a world where that doesn't matter or carry much weight, it does in a lot of spaces, or quite a number of spaces, knowing that you are coming from a prestigious school. For some people, coming from a prestigious school has opened certain doors for them. And those are some things that I really had to think about, to say like, okay, what is the cost of either or, in each case. I think both are good schools, both are good options. And I had my interview with Northwestern as a person who already has an offer from the Van Andel Institute. So even my outlook on everything, I went into that interview thinking to myself to say, there just has to be something from Northwestern that really beats the Van Andel Institute for me to be like, I really want to attend this school. And for me, the biggest concern came at the cost of living there, and just the kind of impact that would have during the duration of my schooling. Now, granted, I think there are definitely certain like pains you may have to like endure for the sake of certain benefits or pros that you can gain in the future as a result of the name of the school that you went to. But for me personally, I feel that there are certain things that I would not want to compromise, for that duration at the cost of having said I went to a certain school, if it came at not only my finances being affected, but also some of these things lead to a certain level of stress that may affect certain relationships that you have. I didn't want that to potentially become an issue for a school that I may not know to say how much I would really like it. Because the other thing is, all this was happening virtually, and so even thinking about that, another thing that I had on my mind was to say, okay, from just the virtual experience alone, I don't think it's been sufficient enough for me to say, this is indeed the school I want to go to. I had it in my mind to say, okay, should I receive an offer here, I definitely have to visit the school in person for me to maybe change like my thought process, or to accept that offer. But yeah, I'm going to head back to the rest of the video right now. But yeah, stay tuned. So sometime in early March, I believe, I got word from Northwestern University and I got waitlisted. Now, granted, of course, the ideal situation would be to have like gotten an offer and whatnot, but at least it was not an outright rejection. So it still made me feel like, okay, I was still being considered, and after like that interview, it wasn't like, yeah, this one, you know what I mean? And yeah, so they had let me know that they were still trying to assess based on like how many like offers they had already sent, how many would respond, and just how many they would be sending as a whole. So yeah, I at the time I left room to say like, okay, I'm going to give it till the end of March to make my final decision, with hopes that they would have gotten back to me regarding their final offer, and if I was gonna actually final decision, and if I was gonna actually get an offer, at least I would need to travel to the school to then make my decision. The deadline for decisions was April 15th, so just this past Tuesday actually, and I wanted to give an answer like days before that. I didn't want to wait for the actual deadline. And so I think that was a few days before the deadline, Northwestern got back to me. But like I said, I wanted to wait till end of March to hear back. And by like the 28th-ish of March, I hadn't heard back from Northwestern. So I was like, yeah, there's just no time. It could have been 26th or 28th. So I had already at the time like started to, make plans and whatnot. So I said, you know what, I am going to accept the offer from the Van Andel Institute, and I was happy with that. So God willing, everything goes as planned. I will be attending the Van Andel Institute graduate school this fall. So yeah, I went ahead and accepted the offer at that point. So yeah, I only really heard from Northwestern a few days, like maybe like a couple of days after I had accepted the offer from the Van Andel Institute. Yeah, like a few days, maybe more than a couple of days after, and they couldn't give me a place at the school. They denied my application. And so yeah, at the time I had already made up my mind on where I was going to go to school. So I was very like I was just very thankful at the end of it all for just the whole experience, to even have interviewed at those two schools. Northwestern is a very good school. It has a prestigious name to it, and so it was nice to have been given the opportunity to be selected for interviews at a school like that. And the same even for the Van Andel Institute. The Van Andel Institute is younger than Northwestern, but it has done remarkable research already. So I was very pleased to have interviewed there and even been given an offer there. So yeah, your girl is getting her PhD. Wow, like even when I received the news from both, I think I actually may have made a video when I received the news from the Van Andel Institute. I think I will probably add it at the end of this video. But it felt so surreal in the moment to just like realize that, wow, something that I have been dreaming about, praying about, something that was just like in my mind and in my heart, is something that is happening in my life. And I just thank God so much for that, and these are the moments that remind me remind me just how much God has done for me, and even just him putting these visions in my heart and these dreams in my heart is such a huge blessing, because I recognize that I'm not deserving of those things. So I'm especially thankful, because to me it's a sign of God's grace on my life. So yeah, I'm just so thankful. I think it also even emphasizes more so what has been a dream on this channel since, I'm trying to remember when I made this channel. I think that was 2021. Between 2020 and 2021, I think it was 2021 when I started this channel. So 4 years down the line, becoming Dr. Kaluba is becoming a reality. So yeah, I thank God for that, and I thank you all for supporting me up until this point. I really appreciate all of you, and if you haven't already subscribe to this channel. There is so much more that I want to share with you. More advice, more tips, more lessons, more failures, because those things are a part of our lives, and those are the things that really make us better at the end of the day. And even as I talk about this subject of graduate school decisions, I just also want to bring to light just what a rough year this has been for applications. As some of you may or may not know already, there has been a funding freeze. And so for research to take place, for research to move forward, it requires funding. And a number of institutions do have like institutional support that they could rely on. But a lot of programs rely on things like grants. They rely on support from the government. And with the current funding freeze, a lot of institutions have sort of been like in a state of limbo with not knowing how much funding they're going to have and how exactly they're going to be able to fund certain projects. And so I know that there's some schools that didn't even like send out or make applications accessible for this year. They were not accepting any students for this coming academic year. There's some schools that have also rescinded offers. So if you're watching this and you're one of those people who had applied this past year, gotten accepted to a school, and then had your offer rescinded, my heart goes out to you completely, because I can't even imagine being in that position. The joy that comes with knowing that something that you've worked hard for has finally, it's coming to fruition, and then that be taken away from you. I can't even begin to imagine what you're going through. So my heart goes out to you, and I truly wish you all the very best and success. It may not feel like things are going to look up for you right now, but I can most certainly assure you that they will. That's the thing about life, and one of the things that I've personally come to appreciate about the journey of life and just God's grace. Things are not always going to work in a linear way. Things are not always going to happen the way that you want them to, but trust that everything is going to work out for your good in the end. It always was for your good. That has been something that I have held close to me, especially in the last few years. That, you know, things may not work out very pleasantly in the moment, and for years, you know, that's a possibility. But I have to trust that everything that is happening, good or bad, is for my good, because God knows what's best for me, and everything is going to work out in the end. It always works out in the end. So please hold on to your faith. Trust that God is with you and He's going to help you. And every door that has been closed is for good reason. Every door that has been opened is for good reason. So trust that, you know, regardless of how things have worked out, you are still going to win in the end. So yeah, it's been a very rough year, unfortunate. And I really hope and pray that, you know, this is not something that you're taking as a personal jab or blow to you, as it honestly may have absolutely nothing to do with you. But keep striving, keep working hard. We're going to make it. And do not, I repeat, do not compare yourself to other people. Comparison is a thief of joy. So keep at it. Your timeline to achieve certain things may not align with someone else's timeline, you know. So trust God's process, have faith, and be confident that things will work out, even though you see your friends move ahead. Trust that one day that light will shine for you. And the mere fact that you see things happening for those around you is a sign that God is in the vicinity and things are going to work out for you. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope overall that you guys have a very good weekend. And yeah, I look forward to sharing more with you. Please feel free to ask me any questions you may have. Feel free to reach out to me via LinkedIn or via my email. It's all in my description. Also, yeah, reach out to me in the comments, share your comments, your feelings, questions that you may have on the process, and I will be more than happy to help you to the best of my abilities. So yeah, take care, guys. Bye.